Catch up on yesterday first. We'll do this chronologically. I have finally been given a copy of your letter to Councillor Maglioka. Why did you write that letter in the way that you wrote it?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, it sounds kind of, I'll say professorish, as in...
We have very limited rule ability to enforce the sanctions, but council did say to write a letter of reprimand. And I've done a lot of that when I was a professor. And so, the letter I think clearly states that the action that was taken was wrong, that it erodes public trust, and that it's time to make amends.
Is there an element of, I'll say, getting political in the sense that you kind of chastised him for things he had said previously about his respect for taxpayers' dollars, and then he did this?
I believe in consistency. I believe that every penny that we spend has to be a penny that we justify on making life better here in the city. And yeah, I believe that if you're going to, argue against affordable housing, saying it's not a good use of taxpayers' money, for example, then you better, everyone really needs to make sure that they are keeping their noses clean. But in particular, you should try and be consistent.
And still nothing from Councillor Maglioka?
Nothing.
Okay.
Do you expect him to come to council meetings? It's kind of a weird situation in that everyone is working remotely and really could be until the next election. It makes it quite difficult for us to ask him, when he's going to respond to this. He hasn't responded, so do you think he owes it to Calgarians to come kind of show his face that?
I don't know that he has to show his face, because I do think that all this distance meeting stuff is important. But to me, it is extremely important as a politician that you've got to be accountable to the citizens that you hope to represent. And the citizens are expecting some action here.
I want to ask a little bit about a topic that kind of came up today, but not entirely. So Edmonton is crafting a plan for dealing with the homelessness issue in their city, and kind of trying to look ahead to the winter and trying to figure out how to house some folks and dealing with the shelter situation and COVID. Does Calgary need to do the same thing? Like, we are
Yes.
quite close to...
Yes, we've been at it for some weeks now. As you know, in the early parts of COVID, we were able to open an emergency overflow shelter at the TELUS Convention Center. And in my mind, it is going to be important for us to have that space available in the winter. Number one, because people who've been sleeping rough may not be able to do that through the winter. And number two, because we have to make sure that we're ready in case there are outbreaks at any of these shelters. So as you know, there is an outbreak at the Calgary Drop-In Center at the moment. My understanding is that they are closed to new intakes, and that has to be for 14 days after the most recent case. So if we end up in a situation where multiple shelters are closed to new intake, we've got a big problem. And so to create that extra capacity is important. Now, I gotta say, I don't love congregational shelter as a solution. I would like to use this moment as a moment to be able to move people out of shelter into more permanent housing. But we've got to strike the balance of solving the problem today as well as fixing the systemic problem. And that has been probably the top thing I've been working on for the last couple of months.
If you're looking at the convention center as an option for this winter, then is it safe to say that what was discussed in July about this opportunity, can we buy some hotels that are empty or for sale, that's not going to happen in the near term?
We are, no, that's, I don't understand. I don't believe that the convention center is in fact being looked at the moment, but there are other options for congregational housing that are being looked at. And my argument has been, rather than throw money away on renting space for congregational housing, let's turn that operational money into capital. For example, buy a hotel where you can put the congregational shelter in the ballrooms and then move people into the actual suites as a more permanent form of housing. All of that stuff, as far as I understand it, is still alive. But ultimately, this is a decision the province has to make, whether they want to be short-term reactive or they want to use this moment to actually deal with some of the root causes as well.
So what you're saying is congregational space is being looked at, but not the convention center?
That is my current understanding. The convention center's business is slowly coming back. There's a challenge with washroom and shower facilities. It could still work, but I know that the province is thinking about other options as well.
Are you seeing that as like an October 1, 15, 31 kind of thing?
I think people would have loved to have announced that already, and it's a matter of getting the right space that meets the operational needs.
Okay.
Again, this is a provincial government thing, but the city has tried to be helpful in making sure that we don't end up inadvertently choosing an inappropriate location. And you know, for example, in Toronto, that has been quite controversial, and we want to make sure that we avoid any of those challenges with communities up front.
Is there any more you can say publicly about your comments off the top of the meeting when you returned from the closed session about what the provincial government was doing with this engagement?
Well, you know, this is not a minor change. Changing Part 17 of the Municipal Government Act is actually a pretty significant conversation about the role of the city as the regulator. And I want to make sure that that conversation is thoughtful and very, very deep. It cannot be superficial. It cannot be consultation only with industry or handpicked folks, because there are real implications to this work.
Can you tell us what it is?
I will invite you to Google Part 17 of the Municipal Government Act.
All right. Can I finish up with, we did touch upon this briefly yesterday about Old City Hall. I just need some quotes for clarity. The mayor's office is not moving back in?
My staff are probably not going to move back. The space, which is a bit sad for all of us, but the space in the historic mayor's office in City Hall really was never quite big enough, and with COVID physical distancing requirements, for now it probably makes sense for us to stay put. However, the mayor's office itself, i.e. my office with the old historical furniture and the casino carpet, will probably end up going back as a more formal place for receiving visitors, for City Hall School when that starts up again, and things like that. But frankly, right now there's no real rush in the whole COVID situation we're in, but I am very excited about seeing the inside of the building again. Now, nothing changed on the inside. It was an exterior renovation, so it'll probably look exactly the same as it did before on the inside. But you know, there's something very special about that place. It's a big part of Calgary's history, and I'm excited to be able to be in there again in whatever capacity I can.
And I understand fully that you are not council's keeper, but I understand some are moving back, some aren't.
I actually don't, I'm sorry, I really don't know the answer to that question. I know that the plan had been for all of council to move back, but as with everything and everywhere, COVID has changed a lot of things.
And as you said, this is for now. This is not like going forward like the way it will be. It's just for now.
Yeah, you know, I would find it difficult to figure out how the mayor's office could fit back in that space without pretty significant renovations, and I'm too cheap for significant renovations. So it might be a little more permanent for us, but I'm not sure what the plan is for the councillors.
I understand the distancing thing, but you know, I don't know, you and your 9, 10, 11 staff came out of there. If it's safe, like the distancing requirements aren't there, you should be able to go back in the same space, right?
It just wasn't great. There were no meeting rooms. People were sitting on one another's shoulders in the space. The technology was difficult. It was hard to, you couldn't do video conferences there, for example. And so the space we've got now is much more conducive to working the office well. And you know, it didn't cost us anything to move in to it, just a little bit. So we'll see how that all plays out. But right now we've got bigger fish to fry.
Just want to quickly ask about the special meeting next week.
Yes.
Police commission and CPS coming in. What are you expecting to hear from them? Are there any preliminary questions you have?
Yeah, so I hope we'll have enough time, because I imagine that members of council are going to have a lot of questions. So coming out of the anti-racism work, coming out of some of the activism around the Calgary Police Service, including a documentary recently shown on CBC, there are a lot of questions around a whole variety of issues that have to do with recruitment, discipline processes, anti-racism work and inclusion work underway in CPS, and of course issues around budget. So I'm looking forward to, I'm going in without any real preconceptions, but looking forward to a very good conversation.
How important is it that as much as possible of that meeting take place in public?
The vast majority of that meeting will take place in public. There will need to be some closed meeting sessions talking about specific personnel issues, some of which frankly were raised by that documentary, as well as a little bit about future budget submissions, but I really want them to be able to answer many questions that have been raised in public.